It's the end of the day with Ray. Hello, my friends. Well, folks, today we're going to jump in that gigantic, sharp, interactive board. I want to share my thoughts on Fujifilm's FY2024. Before I get started, I got to do a big congratulations. Congratulations, Fujifilm. You know, earlier this week, when I was going through Kyocera's FY, which ended March of 2025, I went back in time through their financial presentations and came to the conclusion that over the last 17 years, Kyocera had never gone below the line in operating profit. It was amazing, right? I mean, we all said, congratulations, Kyocera. I decided I would do that same exercise with Fujifilm. In Fujifilm's case, I was able to go back to the FY 2002. 22 years. And do you realize in those 22 years, I only found 1 year where they went below the line in operating profit. 1 year. Ladies and gentlemen, that is just remarkable. And that year was in 2010. And their operating profit was a negative 1.9%. But all the way up to 2010, and clearly all the way after 2010, Fujifilm is doing great with operating profit. They're a disciplined organization. And ladies and gentlemen, operating profit is important, no matter what some folks in the industry might tell you. It's extremely important to Fujifilm, and I know it's extremely important to my friends over there at Kyocera. It's extremely important to everybody, except the folks that happen to lose a whole bunch of operating profit. Then they'll try to make up an excuse why it's okay. Let's look at their top line revenue for the year. FY 2024 for Fujifilm, $22.1 billion in revenue. Operating profit of $2.3 billion, 10.3%. Ladies and gentlemen, every one of their business units knocked it out of the park, and every one of those balls was a home run. There was no foul balls. Healthcare, $552.5 million, 7.7% operating profit. Electronics, $519.3 million, 18.6% operating profit. Business innovation, that's the place we all like, right? All those friends of mine that sell supply and service print equipment. Operating profit, $515.9 million, 6.2%. Look at this imaging business, this camera business for them. $962.9 million in operating profit, 26%. Even their corporate expenses and eliminations were 1.2% of the revenue, leaving them with an operating profit at 10.3% for the whole entire conglomerate, $2.3 billion. This is an amazing accomplishment. Congratulations, Fuji. I wanted to look at this business innovation and compare it to 2023. Are they growing in operating profit? What's going on here in the print business at Fujifilm? Well, business innovation in 2023 had a 5.8% operating profit. In 2024, it had 6.2% operating profit. Grew the ratio, 0.4%. But ladies and gentlemen, I got my red pen in my hand because I have to circle the 6.2%. And you know, it's hard to beat up Fuji a little bit because they got a 6.2% operating profit in their business innovation unit when they came out with a 10.3 as a conglomerate. But I have some concerns. You know, folks, the printing industry, the space is being pressured so many different ways. And I surely don't want to see our friends at Fujifilm, you know, getting where they got a 4%, a 3%, or 2% operating profit in the print space. I want to see them getting double digits in the print space. I want to see them leading the pack in the print space. I seriously doubt if they're ever going to get a 26% operating profit in the print space. But it sure would be nice to see them averaging out between 11 and 15, wouldn't it? And I think it would be in the eyes of Fujifilm as well. So I want to share some thoughts. I want to share some concerns on the divisions within business innovation in today's episode. So when I look at business innovation, top line revenue for FY 2024 was $8.3 billion. Inside business innovation, we have business solutions. That's their IT services, if you will. $2.3 billion in revenue, and that's 27% of the $8.3 billion. When you look at office solutions, the MFPs and printer stuff, $3.6 billion in revenue for FY 2024, 44% of the $8.3 billion. And then their graphics, communication, production, industrial print stuff, $2.4 billion in revenue for FY 2024. That's 29% of the $8.3 billion. But when I was on this page and I'm looking around and I see this imaging business, this camera business. Folks, I want to share some thoughts on this. So this imaging business, this camera business, Fujifilm collected $2.3 billion in revenue from consumer imaging. I'm thinking that's cameras going to consumers. $2.3 billion in revenue. That imaging group as a whole had a 26% operating profit. And the reason I'm bringing this up is I want us to think about the business solutions business within business innovation. It did the same amount of revenue, $2.3 billion. So here's my question to Fujifilm and the audience. Where do you think there's more cost? Do you think there's more cost in the consumer imaging, delivering cameras to consumers? Do you think there's more cost in delivering business solutions to consumers? Fujifilm did the same amount of revenue in both of those categories. Well, everybody with a logical brain in their head is going to say, well, business solutions is going to cost more to deliver. Of course it is. I mean, you have intellect we're selling to end users. We got high payroll dollars, building out ERPs and all the stuff that the business solutions does at Fujifilm. They do a lot of complicated stuff. It costs a lot of money. And if they don't pay attention to that with rifle focused discipline, it could really weight down the operating profit. And I want them to be cautious of that. But I'm thinking, Fujifilm, $2.3 billion in the camera business, that's a good business for you, right? So what do you do in this business innovation to increase the profitability? Well, I've said it before, I'm going to say it many times. Focus on the manufacturing of the print equipment, because you do that really, really well. You make some really good graphics communication stuff. You make some good MFPs, right? Okay, let's go on. I wanted to look at the geographies around the world and see what kind of revenue we're getting out of America. So Fujifilm generates 20.2% of their total revenue from the Americas. That's $4.4 billion. And ladies and gentlemen, business innovation is $8.3 billion total. That means in Americas it's about $1.7 billion if that 20.2% holds out. I don't believe that 20.2% would hold out within each one of these divisions. Like business solutions, I don't think that Fujifilm's doing nearly $500 million in services in Americas. I think most of their business solutions, that IT stuff, the ERP stuff, is in the Asia marketplace. Office solutions or MFP and hardware, I think they're probably doing a little more than, $727 million. Graphics communications, 20.2% of the total number that they do around the world would only be $484.8 million. It would be nice if Fujifilm gave us those numbers rifle focus, what they actually are. Like, what are you doing here in Americas around business solutions, office solutions, and graphics communications? Because it would be nice to see them growing the Americas market. What's going on in the Americas market? We know that Fujifilm has been pretty obsessed in the Americas market, trying to figure out their distribution at street level. Talking to dealers and all these other things. I'm going to share some thoughts on that. Before I get into each one of the divisions, I want to talk about this slide. And this slide, you can see Konica Minolta and Fujifilm at the top. And the reason I'm bringing this slide up is because, folks, there is no excuse to perform poorly financially. No excuse. There's always a situation that could cause it. 1 year here, 1 year there. In Fujifilm's case, they had 1 year in 22 years. In Kyocera's case, no years in 17 years were they below the line in operating profit. And when you listen to the leaders at Konica Minolta talking about how it's not a big deal, everybody has an impairment charge. At the end of the day, with Ray, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, can we look at some realities here? Because these are the realities as I see it. And if Konica Minolta has a different story, they're more than happy to come on the show and explain that story. But when I look at Fujifilm since the year 2020, in the year 2020, by the way, Fujifilm had an operating profit of 7.5%. Our friends over there at Konica Minolta, depending on what Forex you use, but it was over $100 million operating profit loss. In 2021, Fujifilm had a 9.1% operating profit. And by the way, that was a record high for them in 2021. Our friends over there at Konica Minolta, again, depending on the Forex and which one you use, it's over $150 million in operating profit loss. In the year 2022, well, our friends at Fujifilm had a 9.6% operating profit. Konica Minolta, over $600 million operating profit loss. In the year 2023, our friends over there at Fujifilm, they broke another record. 9.3% operating profit. Konica Minolta, they squeaked out 2.5% and had a big party. And then they just ended their FY2024, and we all saw that episode, right? Over $400 million operating profit loss. Our friends at Fujifilm, $2.3 billion. So there is a big deal about not being able to make money. It's a serious deal. Our friends at Fujifilm since 2020 grew their revenue by 46%. Our friends at Konica Minolta grew their revenue by 30%. But at the end of the day, it's great when you can grow your revenue and you're still profitable. That's great. That's a home run. Growing your revenue, chasing revenue at all costs and losing money, it's not a good deal. So when you hear these leaders talking about how it's not a big deal, I think you ought to question those leaders a little bit harder. Because I believe it is a big deal, and I also believe Fujifilm thinks it's a big deal. Our friends at Kyocera think it's a big deal. Most logical business people know it's a big deal, right? Let's talk about this office solutions business. So Fuji, office solutions, MFPs. You're going to go out there and change the world with MFPs. You're here in Americas. Let me ask you a question. What can you get going through dealers more than delivering through others who already have dealers? And I say this because you have this joint venture thing going on with Konica Minolta. Konica Minolta, at the end of the day, come on, joint venture? I still believe this is bank driven. Masters Trust Bank's driving this. That's just my belief. But think about it, Fuji. What are we doing? What's taking so long? Gobble up Konica Minolta. Clean them. Wipe them off the map. Take their distribution. You got all you need here in America. Instead of Konica Minolta machines, there'll be Fujifilm machines. You've got Xerox. Been a partner forever. I know you guys have your issues. But I do believe that you're trying to be better friends. You're not going the other way in the frenemy category, right? You're going the other way. You're trying to be better friends. You know, Xerox just bought Lexmark. Xerox is getting more leverage with all manufacturers because their MIF's growing, right? By adding all that Lexmark MIF. Fujifilm, you're making this stuff for Sharp already. Could you make more? Could you partner deeper with Sharp? Sharp's got a nice dealer network. Xerox has a nice dealer network. I know you're doing some stuff with Kyocera in the high-end inkjet space, right? So what's it going to take for the next bold leader to jump out there and say, we're going to consolidate manufacturing. We're going to be aggressive. Fujifilm, you could do it. You could do it with our friends at Kyocera. You could do it with our friends at Sharp, with our friends at Xerox. But at the end of the day, the one that really needs to go away is this Konica Minolta. The hell with a joint venture. Go in there and get them. Fujifilm has a big equity holder, a bank, Masters Trust Bank, 18.1%. Konica Minolta, the same bank, has 17.59% of them. I've shared this before. As a matter of fact, tomorrow's episode, I'm going to talk about the bank's involvement with the OEM conglomerate. Stay tuned for that episode. But there you go. I do believe that Masters Trust Bank has some pull with both these organizations. And at the end of the day, Fujifilm, you're in a place, but you got to make stuff happen. Let's talk about the graphics communications business. You know, Fujifilm, you're really good at this space. You own it for the most part. You do a really good job in this space. And you've provided some really, really good equipment into the marketplace. You have a great relationships with these industrial print shops all over the world, here in Americas too. But my caution is this. Don't believe you can pivot from graphics and industrial print into office business printing. And as I watch you here in Americas, and I know you have a big emphasis on this graphics communications business, you got that fantastic facility in Hanover, Illinois, but I don't believe the path to owning the marketplace in office business printing is through graphics and industrial communication. And you know, I believe those are two separate animals. And I think that could be some of the struggles that's going on at Fujifilm in their aspirations here in the Americas. And that's my cautionary to you. But I also believe that there's a better way to get your products into the marketplace, into those end users' offices throughout the Americas, by utilizing the distribution that's already there, by getting more involved with that distribution that's already there. Let's talk about this business solutions business, and this is that IT stuff. And folks, like I said, most of this is in the Asian marketplace, but they're doing some pretty complicated things in this space. And this space scares me a little, because I don't want to see Fujifilm doing IT services based on some kind of commodity platform. You know, OEMs are OEMs. And I really struggle. I really struggle with them getting into this IT stuff. I know they're all trying to figure out how to diversify, how do we get extra income. But Fujifilm, it's not going to be about getting extra income if it wears down your operating profit. And it's just a caution I have for you. I want you to think about my Ricoh episode. As a matter of fact, I want all the Fuji leaders to go watch it. It was yesterday's episode. Because it can't be about a service driven to commoditization. Fujifilm, please watch the episode regarding Ricoh's FY2024, where I share my thoughts regarding the poor operating profits within Ricoh's digital services business. You know, Ricoh's collecting billions and billions of dollars worth of revenue. And they lump it all together, kind of like you do, Fuji, and I wish you'd break some of this out. You break out the revenue, but you should break out the operating profit. Show the world that you can deliver services and IT services and have an operating profit in the 15 or 20 percentile. That'd be awesome. But if it's just going to wear you out with high-end costs, I want you to think about your camera business. I want you to watch my episode. Because it is a scary, scary slope to go down. And I don't want you to head down that slope. And everybody watching me knows this. Status quo is the killer of all that'll be invented. Don't get stuck there, and I'll see you all on Friday.